So yeah, man, we're here with Raul, and Raul is he was on the board of one of the associations we were managing, or we I guess we're technically currently managing them for the next couple months, and just wanted to have him on. We had a very interesting past few months, weeks and months, with regards to that, and this is the first. I know for me, it's like kind of the first association that we're terminating with, right? And so in life, I think, sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. It's never a loss unless, you make it that. But I think that there's plenty that we can take away from this situation, and kind of how it all precipitated. And I don't, I'm looking back at it and I think of all the ways that a relationship with an association could end. I'm okay with this one just because of the details of it. Yep. But I think it's important to let the viewers know and talk to them about kind of, what transpired and why it's important that they really understand these things that we're going to talk about today. Because I think you did an amazing job as the board president. And
Thank you.
Yeah, no, you did, and Kristen as well, and I feel good. If I look back on what we did for that association, I feel good about what we did, and it's just an interesting misalignment of values with a lot of other owners. So maybe you can start by telling them a little bit about you, what you do for your day job, and kind of how you ended up on the board and your story. I think that's a good starting place because I really enjoy your story, and I think it's good for people to hear it.
Yeah, so I grew up in that town, and I did high school there, and lived there with my mom. Went to college while I was living there. Got my job that I'm currently at while I was in Meriden. So a lot of my life was just kind of revolved around being in Meriden.
Yep.
Which made it kind of unique, and also kind of I had an emotional attachment, obviously, to the town. So. So when those places came up for sale, it was really like kind of a no-brainer. I was already living in Meriden in my own house.
Right.
So just moving there really was kind of fit in our long-term plan.
So you came from a single family?
I came from a single family.
Interesting. And for the viewers, Meriden, Connecticut is it's a small city,
Yeah, it's heavily populated. It's about 60,000 people there.
Okay.
In 25 square mile area.
And it's interesting because it's really centrally located, and I think and there's some beautiful parts of it.
There is, yeah.
I think just over if comparing, because I grew up the next town over, and I had a previous business in Meriden, and my mom had a business in Meriden, and it appears to me that the city leadership never really prioritized reinvestment in the community, or reinvesting the right way to, they always talk about redeveloping it and stuff like that. It's a little bit of a more depressed community, higher taxes and stuff like that. But there's a ton of potential, and they've wanted to do nice stuff for a long time. And I'm not sure that they've gone about it the right way, but.
Well, you can get into the weeds of where they went wrong. $2 million bridge to nowhere.
Right.
Mixed income housing is, it's shown to fail. So.
Right. And you grew up there, and you've got. I know it's interesting because today's election day.
Yeah.
You went and you voted on your way here.
I went and voted on my way here.
Nice.
Yeah. And part of the reason why I love Meriden too is you can think about all the things that it has. Mm-hmm. It has a hospital.
Right.
Has technical high school.
Yep.
Has an airport.
Right.
Has a park that was partially designed by the same guy who did a Central Park in New York.
Really?
Yep.
That park was designed by the same guy, huh?
Yep.
It is a nice park.
We have 2 high schools. We have a magnet elementary school.
Yeah.
There's so many things there that they can bring a mall.
Right.
It's a failing mall, but
failing mall, right?
Still there.
Yeah, and that's another interesting component, right? Like, you look at the West Farms Mall up in West Hartford, and that mall's still doing well because the city around it has catered to a specific, demographic and economic system.
Sure.
And I think Meriden that has not embraced that. It's embraced a different kind of economic strategy, and you can kind of see the fallout from that.
Yeah, well, we spoke about that before. The mayor there is a mayor in name only, so
Right.
city manager who just ended up being involved in the police again for a second time. I don't think he has the pulse on what that city needs.
Right.
So he's an unelected official, which makes it worse.
He's appointed. Interesting.
Yep.
Okay. Very fascinating. And so it's interesting because the community or the HOA that you have your unit in,
Yep.
beautiful. I think probably one of the nicest, if not the nicest HOA in Meriden, highest resale values in the city.
By far.
By far, yeah. Beautiful, brand new, well done. I think soundly put together. I haven't heard, we haven't had really any major maintenance issues
Right.
to speak of. Little stuff here and there, but I talk about in other podcasts of like developers cutting corners on the construction component.
Yeah.
And I know that there's some stuff that you guys weren't super thrilled with, but I think by and large the units are put together very well.
Yeah, well, the beauty of that was everything was a la carte. So you can,
Really?
if you wanted crown molding, you can get it.
Oh.
You can have your floor stained. It was really like highly customizable.
Interesting.
I got there. After that, though, it was because of that big housing boom and everything was selling real fast.
Right.
They just started to build them, and they were just furnishing them or picking whatever they wanted,
Right.
and then selling them that way. And they were selling
Like hotcakes.
hell yeah.
And so you got in there in what year? When did you buy your unit?
2018.
And you were a part of the building process? So
Yeah, so buildings, you're familiar with it, buildings 7, 6, and 8 weren't even there when I got there.
Okay.
And then I had them build 2 units in between me so that I can get my end unit.
Really? That's hysterical.
Yeah.
And so I take it you were very happy with the unit itself.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I mean, it's a beautiful property. It's nice inside. It's a 3-bedroom?
3 bedrooms, 2-car garage,
Yeah.
2.5 bath.
Townhouse style.
Townhouse, yep.
So 3 levels, garage, first level, second level.
2,000 square feet.
Amazing.
It's big. It's nice.
Yeah. And they sell for, roughly, I think they're going almost $400K right now, right?
It's like 325.
Oh, $325. Okay. I thought there was one that was up for $380 or something like that.
It's possible.
That's what I heard. I heard there was one up for $380. I didn't personally see it, but it's a good time to sell. Well, it's a good market right now in Connecticut. So you got on the board in what year then? So you bought your unit in 2018.
So in 2019 I got on.
Okay. So you were new to the complex.
Yep. We had a vacancy.
On the board.
Correct.
So talk to me a little bit about what the board landscape, the HOA landscape looked like when you got there. Obviously, we're not using, last names.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So the way it was set up was because the contractor still had an interest in the units because they weren't all sold or 60% sold or whatever the number is.
Right.
They had a seat on the board.
Okay.
Right. So, and at that point, you can have, they could appoint who they wanted, and they didn't necessarily have to be an owner on the deed. And
Interesting. Yeah.
We ran into that. So there was one guy who was leaving, the contractor and his interest, and then another unit owner.
Okay.
On the board, where the contractor was the management company had a vote.
Interesting. Right, because they're the developer. Right.
Which the operation was a little bit different than what I experienced with Paladin.
Okay.
Communicate. I don't know how far you want me to go.
Yeah. We can get into it. Just this is educational. So.
Yeah. So it was more of the communication, the fact that contractor didn't live there, and access to information.
Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things that I said when we went with you was, we want the transparency of what you guys offer digitally, and we got it. But was underutilized by the people who were using it.
Right. Well, I think it's just a small group of older people.
Yeah.
But I think by and large, a lot of community members did use the
Well, the pay and all that other stuff. Yeah.
and even the maintenance requests. It
The
was
right maintenance requests, yeah. But as far as the financials went, I think that, people, to be frank, they didn't care
right.
because things were cheap.
Right.
And part of that was, and this is where I learned, when I went in there, I had the mindset as like, I want all these units to sell for top dollar. So I had to keep that in mind with people who were coming in. Because you look at a place, right, like ours, we don't have a pool, we don't have a clubhouse, but you see a $300, HOA fee, and that's something like, even I would look at and like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So my first couple years was like, give me all your contracts that you got. I want to look them over. I want to see where we can save money. So that's what I did. The first year went down, second year went down, third year went up, and then went up again, then up again. Where what I failed to understand, and it's I guess my fault, the educational part of it, was how important the reserves were. So I was thinking, all right, maybe and I believe it or not, one of the unit owners brought it up. He was like, we shouldn't go backwards. If we go backwards, they're going to expect backwards.
Back when you were lowering the fees.
Correct.
Interesting. And just to shed some light on that, there's the general or the basic premise, right? At a surface level, and there's layers to it, but at a surface level, the cost of the unit or how much you can get for a unit is inversely proportional to the HOA dues, right? So people look at a place that has $300 dues, and generally speaking, they'll pay less for that unit than a place that has $150 dues, because just with the mortgage and how much they can get qualified for and all that stuff. So, but the flip side of that is a lot of times places with lower dues, they're not really funding their long-term capital reserves effectively.
Right.
So, but for the developer doesn't care because they're out.
Well, I think that was the key there.
Right.
They didn't really care. They knew they were walking away.
Right. And the developer wanted to maximize their resale of each unit as they're building it. And to do that, they want the dues as low as possible.
Makes sense.
So you were there towards the tail end of that.
Right. Well,
And
they started this in 2010.
Okay. Right. So you bought in 2018, but you were on the board for the tail end of the construction.
Right.
And then it came time where the developer had built everything they could build, and they were turning it over to you guys.
Right.
And that's when I was introduced to you. But just talk us through that process and kind of, again, we can circle back around to the things that weren't working well for you and what you were looking for moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah. So it started obviously when, like you said, they no longer had an interest, and they approached us and said, "We're out. Find somebody new." So that's when the search began. They recommended somebody, and then I was like, I'm going to go and I'm going to look more because, to be honest with you, the way they operated, whoever they were recommending, I was under the impression they were going to operate the same way, and I didn't want that.
Right.
So that was one part of that. The other part, obviously, was the financials. Everybody was like, nobody wants to pay by check anymore. So that started to narrow the search. And after I got, feedback from a lot of people that was the big deal, it dropped one guy off. And he was like, "Man, I've got 25 plus years of experience, and you don't want to go with me because I can't offer you a digital option to pay."
Right.
And I was like, "Yeah." So, and it just turns out that it was also who she had recommended.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. So I didn't, there was twofold why we kind of rejected that. And then the other guy, a company out of New Haven who had some pretty big properties. He was, he had online pay, but it just didn't seem as if he had like he was, invested in us. Like, okay, this would be cool to have, but do I really want it? Type. I mean, he met with us and he talked us through it. No presentation. Didn't bring any material. Didn't even have a computer. Just sat there and was just like talking with us. I was like, well, we want to see what your system looks like, and nothing.
Okay.
So that's how we kind of narrowed it down. After we already had met with you before we met with him,
right.
And I'll give you the credit. It was a phenomenal presentation.
Thanks.
But the fact that I didn't even call you, I called somebody else who passed the information along to you. You reaching out to us, answering all the questions, sitting down, giving a really good presentation, breaking down. You were like, "Let me see your bylaws," and
right. Well, yeah, because you had questions that only your condo docs can answer, right?
Right. And you just how knowledgeable you were about, where we can make improvements and what we didn't have, and it was a lot of good information. So that's how we ended up going with your property management. It was a real educational experience more than it was a pitch to have you come work for us. A lot of things I didn't know about. I didn't know about reserve studies. I didn't know that we had the ability to bring in maintenance standards and gardening standards, and
right.
all things that we sort of had in our documents, but needed clarification.
Yeah,
which we all thought was a great idea.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think you guys honed in on that, and I think it was really beneficial. And just for the viewers, tell them a little bit about what you do for your day job.
Oh, so for my day job, I'm a helicopter mechanic for Sikorsky.
Nice.
I work on flight operations.
Okay, awesome. And
just promoted too.
Really?
Yeah, crew chief.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice. And so, and that you seem to really enjoy.
I do, yeah. Doing it for 19 years now.
And you're in school as well.
Yep, for unmanned systems with a minor in intelligence.
Interesting. Yeah. You think you're going to get scooped up by the government after this?
If they're using unmanned systems to surveil people,
yeah,
maybe.
And I think that's and the reason why I bring it up is because one of the things I've learned about you is you're a systems guy. You like to have a plan. You like to follow a plan, and you like to follow the book. Like there's a book on, these are the rules. This is how we get from A to B. This is how we achieve the end result. And it's just a very logical and linear process, and that's how your brain works.
Well, part of it's because of what I do.
Right.
You start deviating from emergency procedures, you can find yourself in a lot of trouble.
Right.
And when you're 5,000-6,000 feet in the air, it's kind of hard to pull over.
Right.
So you really kind of want to do things the way they're meant to be done, because you find, it might save your life.
Right.
Or it might take it. So.
Right. And the stakes are high.
They're very high. Yeah.
Right. And then the other board member, because you had a 3 and then one dropped off relatively early on. Correct. In our tenure. And then the other one, Kristen, she's an attorney.
Yeah.
Do you know what kind of law she practices?
I believe it's workman's comp.
Okay. Yeah. And she's very smart, very, again, a very logical, linear thinker, yep. Right? And what I appreciated working with you guys is I think very similarly to that, yeah. Right? And I think we had a good working relationship, and we were able to get a lot done and accomplish a lot because we were efficient, we were focused, and we were able to do a lot of what we thought was good for the community.
Yeah, I think we saw what that place is, how beautiful it is, mm-hmm. the potential there. If you do it right, mm-hmm. long term,
yep.
you can really maximize your investment.
Absolutely. And some of the things that you personally felt were important to preserving and maximizing that investment was what?
Yeah, just the overall aesthetics of the place really was important to me.
Okay.
And home value, obviously, really important. But I felt that you can only achieve that if there was some structure. You know what I mean? There's countless times where I would just be walking around and you see people working on their cars in the driveway and jack stands and digging into the pavement and, so many things
Pouring paint down the driveway.
Pouring paint down the driveway. One guy wanted to enclose his deck.
Right.
Yeah. So there was a lot of there was a lot of, and I think I mentioned it in one of my president's speech was, owning a condo is not the hallmark of individuality.
Right.
Because, you're not living on your own. You're living with 40 other people.
Right.
In close quarters.
Right.
I look out my window and I see your place. Mm-hmm. And if, your Christmas lights are up in July.
May. Yeah. Right.
So bringing that structure, I think was the most important thing, to achieve, because again, when I got there, it was a legitimate free for all.
Right. And I appreciated the, it definitely felt this way, that when we came in, you were like, all right, we're going to whip these guys into shape. You guys had just transitioned from the developer where anything went. And I think, part of what I learned, is when I reflect on kind of where we might have gone wrong is maybe we tried to change too much too quick.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah. And I think it was all good changes. I think it were all changes that needed to happen.
Yeah.
But, as with anything, when we come in too hot, a lot of people, especially, people who aren't really open to change, period.
Right.
They tend to dig their heels in. And so I think one of the things that, we kind of were big on enforcing rules, and rules that seemed relatively minor, but I understand from your perspective is hey, this is a small example of a bigger problem.
Right.
Right. So leaving your decorations up all year long, or not, having, not planting a garden in the common elements and then not taking care of.
Right. And I was I was actually called petty about it.
Right.
Which, it may seem that way, and I understand that, but where I was coming from was, I'm trying to help you as well. And I don't think for me that translated well. I tend to, just my demeanor is not really a bubbly one. So right. I sometimes I have a grin on my face that just, some people can take the wrong way, but
yeah.
My first and foremost love to be positive, and, I like to think critically and, think about not just now, because I don't like to be short-sighted about anything.
Right. I think you have a big heart, and you I know at the end of the day you mean well, because speaking with you in our conversations and board meetings, I know what your intention is with these things.
Yeah.
I think that, you grew up in Connecticut. I grew up we're just kind of blunt.
Yeah.
It's a cultural thing. We're pretty direct, but, some people are just, and this isn't to just put the blame on them, but some people are more sensitive than others. Right?
Sure.
And, part of my job and where I can improve is understanding that and navigating that to make the message more palatable.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I think that was, how do I say it? When I know even when we interviewed and when I started this company and I chose that logo and I chose, that name and that marketing for this company, my intention was always to fight on behalf of the association. And, and I feel that I did that for you guys. However, usually the battles I was fighting prior to this, you guys were in pretty good shape.
Yeah,
and you guys hadn't been screwed over by anybody too severely.
I think we were put on a bad path to start.
Right.
But I don't think it was anything that we couldn't turn around, which I think that's what we were trying to accomplish.
Right. And so a lot of times, my role or my purpose was to fight on behalf of the association against people who were trying to undermine or, really cause harm to the association. But usually the stakes were a little higher in my experience prior to you guys, as far as someone causing serious property damage,
Yeah.
water losses or fires or, if it was a unit owner thing, they're really just like causing life safety hazards, or like municipalities that were really doing a disservice to the community and not doing their job. And with you guys, it seemed like we were still trying to fight for what's in your best interest, but just lower stakes in the sense of we're talking about decorations, we're talking about plans, we're talking about, and I reflect on kind of how I come off and how the whole brand comes off is a little aggressive, right? And it's really good in some situations, but maybe in others, can be a little bit of a turnoff.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I don't think that, I think just knowing some of the unit owners, I don't think it mattered. You know what I mean? Because really, despite all the changes that we could have made, it came down to the dollar for everybody. That was the battle that we fought. I mean, I think people could stomach the Christmas lights and all the other things, but I mean, I think when you're fighting, or when you're trying to make an argument for more money, and somebody comes in and says, "We'll do less money," I mean, it's really hard to can't debate it.
Right. So
no matter how good, and I'll tell you, your explanation of why we should do this was spot on. And I heard from another owner that well, it was in the meeting that
she's a realtor, and she's like, "This is crazy that you guys are making this decision right now."
Yeah.
And we're going to get to that. So I'm just trying to get us there incrementally how we got there, right? So there was that. I think that set the tone. And then the next big hurdle we had was the maintenance standards.
Yeah, that was a big one.
That's when this coup kind of started to form, if you remember, right?
Yep.
So talk to the viewers, because again, this is one of the biggest precipitating factors and what ultimately happened. And it's a weird situation, because it's one of those things that no matter what happens, I'm proud that we did that, because it was the right thing to do.
100%.
And it was the right thing for you guys to do. So
I think and when I reflect back on what went wrong, I think that we assumed that if people cared, they would come to the meetings. If they want to be a part of what's going on, they'll come. And then, our first meeting, the first quarter, was 3 people.
Right.
And
one of them had a hearing.
Yeah. And then, right. And then next quarter, maybe 5, because there was a new guy who had just moved in.
Right.
He came up. And then, we talked about this right off the bat, that, okay, we're going to try to implement some maintenance standard. That first meeting, it was on the agenda. We worked on it. It was on the agenda. We talked about it. Then the third, I believe it was the third meeting, on the agenda, we were talking about it, finalized everything. Everything went out to everybody. Massive uprising.
Right.
But I think it was because of a misinformation that went around.
Correct.
Because I don't know if this is where you want me to go with this, but if in there was some provisions about if you weren't complying, it's possible, depending on the situation, that the management company or the association may have to enter your unit.
If there's an emergency situation,
Right.
Yeah.
So
but that's in the bylaws. That was
already in there.
That wasn't something we did.
No.
It referenced a bylaw section that was already present.
Correct.
And it's present in most condo docs, where if there's an emergency situation and you are not granting access to the unit, management or the board has the authority to enter to rectify the issue.
Right.
And then bill it back.
Which is pretty clearly drawn out in what we had, our docs that we already had, which, mind you, other people, everybody had to sign it.
Right.
Acknowledging it. Now, if you didn't read it, which is what we kind of ran into a lot.
Right.
If you didn't read it, then you would have never known that we already had the authority to do that.
Correct.
Which, excuse me, which people also didn't understand, which we thought was a little bit going too far, was that we were technically supposed to have keys to everybody's unit.
Yeah, that's too much.
And we agreed.
Yeah.
Everybody agreed, okay, that's a little bit too far.
Right.
Well, why they had that in there, not sure. And it's something we could have changed, you know what I mean? But I think it all goes back to them reading that information
And-
knowing what they signed.
Right. And I think part of it also goes back to the docs that you guys were working from were boilerplate docs that
Which we tailored to what we
needed.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was errors in the document. The original condo docs, there's references that don't exist, and
Sure.
there was issues. And it wasn't unique to their association. It's a boilerplate. It was a boilerplate condo doc that is used a lot in Connecticut.
Yeah.
I've seen it at at least 5 other associations, and I don't know if they're used outside of Connecticut, but I know it is a common one that I've seen because it has a very specific error in the limited common elements and who repairs replacements, a reference that does not, it's a ghost reference. It references an article and section that's not there, an Article K. And it's a very specific error, and I see it at a lot of different associations. So I know they're all kind of pulling from the same boilerplate document, legal document. But that said, I think you guys, within the confines of the docs you had, the purpose of adopting these maintenance standards was really to say, if there's an insurance loss or if there's a water loss or a fire loss, we don't want all of the unit owners to be liable if one person was negligent.
Right.
And so those maintenance standards, and I preach it all the time, they're so important to assign liability to a single unit owner if they were negligent in their maintenance of their unit, right? They're not changing their water heater. They're not cleaning their dryer vent. They're not, maintaining their furnace, right? These are things that can cause major losses, fires and floods and all this stuff. And the purpose of the maintenance standards is to say, hey, listen, this is how you guys need to take care of your place so that we don't have a loss. And if you violate these, then you're on the hook, rather than all of the unit owners via their insurance policy.
I thought it was well explained.
It was. It was. And so this is the most interesting piece about the whole thing is that, again, we reflect back on it. We're like, we did the right thing. Like the fact of the matter is we followed the correct procedure. Any attorney would have advised us that, yes, adopt the maintenance standards. Yes, I mean, we used a template that an attorney wrote. We had an attorney on the board revising it, going line by line, scrutinizing it. I looked through it. You looked through it. We're all in agreement that this is a good document. It is a good thing to do.
Yeah.
And then it gets distributed, and a couple of unit owners read it the way they want to read it. Angrily and offended that basically that the board's telling them, how they should be maintaining their own place, right? Their own home.
Oh, there was plenty of that.
Right. And so that's the thing. It's like, okay, you're salty because we're putting out these rules and guidelines, and you're saying, well, I know how to take care of my place. I don't need you to tell me, and I don't need you to enforce me making sure my water heater gets changed.
And I think the common theme of that when we went and there was this uprising about it, was that, everybody's going to do whatever they can to skirt the rules.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That was our perspective. Like, these need to be in place because maybe you are correct and you're going to do the right thing, but there's going to be people who aren't.
Yeah.
And eventually there's going to be a loss. And when that loss happens, these protect you. Right? Because you did the right thing. So why should you have to pay? Right?
Yeah.
So, these documents get put in place. There's a handful of unit owners that are all friends that are mostly older. They're not really up to date on the computer system, the electronic
aspect of it. Yeah.
And they get together and they kind of take from those documents, basically just take out of context certain parts, the worst parts, and get everybody riled up.
They riled them up.
And said, this is what they're trying to do, XYZ, which was not the case.
Not at all.
We're not trying to go into your units. You guys weren't even asking, requiring that they submit documentation.
No, we were just saying that in the event, you might want to hold on to that.
Right. Because if something happens, this is your evidence to
and again, coming from the perspective of trying to protect them.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Protect everybody, because now you get into claims and you get into all this other things, and then next thing you know, we can't afford our insurance, and it's a snowball. It's a slippery slope.
Brand new complex, 38 units, zoned as single family, right? And no claims history.
None.
and brand new, and you guys are still paying $20,000 a year for insurance,
Right.
20 plus, right?
Almost 22, yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, and you put one claim on there and that's going up to 33, right? So you're getting a 50% increase to all unit owners with one claim. So the maintenance standards are there to protect everybody so that you guys don't have to put claims on the master policy because you subrogate it to the HO6 because someone didn't do what they were supposed to do, right? There was a dryer fire.
Yep.
But that was because they didn't clean their dryer vent, right? Without maintenance standards, the associate, you know, the HO6 will cover the first $5,000 or whatever, but then the HOA is on the hook for it. Whereas you have maintenance standards, you say, you guys didn't maintain your unit properly, which causes fire. You guys got to pay to fix it. You guys got to pay your stuff and you got to pay our stuff, right? So are we acting on the best, were we acting in the best interest of the community?
I mean, I wouldn't have done it if we weren't.
Right. 100%.
And that's kind of what I like to talk to people about is that, like, that's why we're here. And I think what got lost too in there was that there was a disconnect in the fact that they saw Paladin in us and not us as owners and you as a management company helping us.
Right.
They saw us as one.
Yeah, and an authoritarian kind of entity.
Right. Because it was, you know, the things like, you know, the parking when we were notifying people, right, violations that, you know, you're not supposed to be parking
On the street.
or you know, perpendicular to your driveway.
Right.
Like, you know, they get the call from you and they're like,
right.
And then they know it's from us because we live there and you don't. You know
Right.
what I mean? So we became this one entity.
This one evil entity.
Yeah, instead of, you know, us being like, okay, we're owners here. Don't forget that I have to pay this too. Mm-hmm. Don't forget that if I don't do it, I'm in trouble. Mm-hmm. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, I became totally disconnected from that being an owner. And that goes to some of the community members would have little meetings and this and that. And I would go to them. Mm-hmm. And just one day I got bombarded. I mean, absolutely lit on fire.
This is previous to us.
This is previous to you about the things that were going on there and the things that we were trying, the things that I was trying to implement then. And the other person who was on the board with me didn't show up and just got completely let off the hook. So I stopped going.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I want to go there and I want to get to know you guys. I want to hang out. I want to eat some lemon cookies because they were great. But, you know, it's just when that happened to me, I had to pull back because I'm not going to go there on my time off, my Saturday, you know, time that I could be spending with my family to just get roasted.
Right. And I see that. It's interesting. I don't know if so we'll get into it, but there's been a few interactions with Sam. Again, I'm not going to use his last name, but that are just that are out of line, right? Like just saying things that are clearly inflammatory, clearly just
some
derogatory, insulting, like just trying to get a reaction,
condescending.
Right. So just going to say these things that are untrue or marginally true, right? And then, you know, use it as a platform to hurl insults and demean, right?
Yeah.
Be demeaning. And, you know, my job is to be professional and respond professionally.
As is mine.
Right. And there was that maintenance request about the branches that were touching his unit, right?
The one we tried to figure out.
We tried to figure out. He wouldn't submit any pictures. He just explained it. He explained it poorly. We had no idea what he was talking about. And ultimately, you know, just starts insulting us for not being able to figure out what in the world he's talking about. So finally he says it. I send a guy over there after the meeting. This is like earlier this week or last week. After he said all this stuff that was insulting, I said, all right, you know what? I'm going to do him a solid. I know, you know, even after everything precipitated, we're probably going to part ways and whatever, but I want to do the right thing for him because so I send a guy out there. He sends me a message today. He's like, you know, you didn't do anything. The guy came, he disturbed my wife while, he disturbed my wife in the middle of the day to find out what it was. And then he trimmed a few branches and he left. And I had to go out there with my torn quad and, you know, do the job the right way. You guys are useless, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, you know, you try to do the nice thing for someone, right?
It's counterproductive.
Oh yeah. And it's like, I always say, like, I had a contractor say it to me. It's like, I don't know what you did. I don't know what he did for work, but when you're at work and someone treats you that way, and you're genuinely trying to help them, and they take that as an opportunity to insult you and demean you, does that make you want to help them more?
Right.
Does that make you want to do right by them? Right? And people say, well, it's your job. You got to do that. It's like, my job is to do what's right for the whole association, not necessarily just help you. Right? And and it's just one of those things where I share that because that is a integral member in this kind of group of people where this is kind of stemming from, right? Yeah. And I think they're people that are at their core, unhappy or dissatisfied with life, and
that's possible,
or or at the very least, combative.
So I think part of that was prior to you, because there was a lot of things that didn't get done then before you got there,
right?
And this person was complaining then, you know what I mean? So, I mean, things don't, again, and what I found in this business is that, things aren't moving at light speed like some other things. There's a lot of logistics when it comes to getting contractors out there, or people, or timing. Just look what happened with the doors. It was rain. It rained for like 3 weeks.
Yeah, we scheduled it 3 times in a row, and each day, because we had to schedule all the unit owners, they had to be home, and each time it would rain.
Right, and it's completely out of our control. Not only that, like the tree thing, before you came on board, I had already gotten
these quotes,
3 quotes to get all of this done. Then the transition comes. Then there's other things that are going on. Right. Now we have to reprioritize.
But his complaint wasn't even about those trees. It was about literally a bush that was touching the side, like it had grown and touched the siding of his unit. And
it wasn't, I mean, maybe it was rattling his window or something. His living room is right there.
No, it was in the garage. It was a garage.
It was the garage one?
Yeah.
Okay. But we did have somebody, and that would have all been taken care of. It should have been taken care of with the last management company. We had all of this kind of like ready to go. I walked through. Granted, that may have not have been what I focused on when it came to getting that fixed or trimmed up. But it was the process. The ball was already rolling to get it. And if it was an issue, we could have taken care of it.
Right.
And it wouldn't have been a problem. But because there was, changes in management, changes in priority, you know what I mean? It's just something, it's the nature of what we were kind of doing.
Right. And I think my point in talking about this is we're not, the issues that people are making a big deal about, I mean, they're a couple, like we're talking about a bush, not a tree, bush that is touching the screen of the window.
Right.
And when the wind comes, they hear the rattling on the screen of the window. And this is the bane of this person's existence. This is like the worst insult in the world because this was not resolved. And mind you, it was sent in an email. Finally, it was put in page HOA, but there was no picture. And I said, hey, can you please put a picture?
Right.
And he's like, no, I'm explaining it to you. If you don't understand which bush I'm talking about, you're stupid. Yeah. And I went and I looked. I walked it with you. I walked it with the landscaper. Yeah. I walked it by myself. I used to own a landscape. I did not know which bush he was talking about because it wasn't something that was glaringly obvious.
Well, and just for like some context, like there is bushes he's in an end unit, so there's bushes all over.
Right.
You know
He's got 20 bushes around his place, right? Like
it's not just one bush like, oh, I can identify that bush. There was a lot of bushes. And to be honest with you, I didn't know exactly what the problem was.
And they all of them looked trimmed up, right? Because the landscaping company had been trimming them.
Right.
It was like a couple branches on the backside of the bush between the bush and the building, that ultimately ended up being the problem. But he was making such a big deal about it. We're looking at the tree, we're looking at all this stuff, right? So my point is, and I think one of the things that I think you alluded to is, so off the bat, we have this bad rap of kind of being authoritarian, right? We get these maintenance standards, and mind you, we have a comment period, right?
Oh yeah.
And we get a ton of comments back about these maintenance standards. And here's the thing, like the board does not have to act just in light of the comments, right? The comment period is just because someone submits a comment doesn't mean you guys have to change anything.
Right.
But there was enough comments where you guys, you know what, let's have a meeting with owners.
Yep.
And which was the right thing to do. And let's hear what they have to say, which you did. You explained your position. You allowed unit owners to explain theirs. We went line by line through the maintenance standards and looked at what the actual language was and explained each one. And that meeting ran into a second meeting. Like it was a 2-hour meeting.
Yep.
And then, we still had a decent amount left. So let's schedule another one. Had another 1.5-hour, 2-hour meeting to discuss these maintenance standards because they were the right thing to do and they were important for the association.
And, I just want everybody to know that how serious I took that, that I went through each and every complaint.
And comment.
And comment and insult. And then in red, responded to each one. Just in case they felt like none of their questions were answered, I had it ready. It was 7 letters that we got.
Right.
And some of them were lengthy, insult filled, and accusations of things that are not happening. And I referenced every bylaw or everything in our documents that to answer their question, saying, "Hey, this already exists. This is why we're strengthening it." And I did it for each and every one of them. Now they didn't know that, which whatever. I'm not looking for anything for it. But we took one unit owner who was the most rational
and touched on most of the points.
It touched on most of them. Yeah.
And it just wouldn't have been time. It wouldn't have been productive to go through each and every.
No, it wouldn't have. But I took the time to do that for a specific reason because I want them to know. I always wanted that I will take the time to do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it took me hours to go through all of that.
Many hours. It was a lot, dude.
It was a lot.
It was a lot. They were long. And a lot of them went through each section of the maintenance standards, right? And you had to go back through it each. Because the thing is, they were all talking to each other. So a lot of the baseless stuff was like they match. Like you guys are all talking to each other, and you're not actually reading the docs because the docs don't say.
It was evident from the start that they didn't read it.
Right, because the docs aren't saying what you're saying.
Right.
The maintenance standards, like you're making claims that aren't in the document, but you're all talking about this thing that doesn't exist.
Right.
Because you're all talking to each other and not actually reading the docs, right?
It's a telephone thing, man. These guys, everybody just went, and the story just kept getting worse and worse as it went around, and then it started to bleed outside of the group that was really inflamed.
Right, and so there's a group of like 4 or 5 that were inflamed, and so this is the piece, this is the component where I think, in retrospect, I don't know how much we could have done, but I remember having the conversation with you around that time. Like, this was started off in June. By the time we were done with the comment section, finally ratified those maintenance standards, it was August. And I said, Raul, elections are in November. This is a political game. It's a political thing, right? And I said, we have to get out there, kiss babies. You gotta, because I think a lot of the people didn't know you, right? And they didn't, you knew them from previously when you used to be involved, or be part of that group and kind of were friends with everybody. But they had this social circle, and it pulled a lot of influence with other neighbors, right? They were out there. They were talking to people. They were campaigning months and months in advance when all of this stuff was going on. They were having these conversations. They were meeting with their neighbors. They were talking out in their driveway and all this stuff. And, when I look back and say, okay, how could we have played this differently? One of the things that is evident to me is like, it's a political game at the end of the day. Yeah. It's a political, it's a democratic process. And we need to be involved in the community, have those kind of ties and roots in the community where we know what's going on and we know we have a certain amount of votes and we know that we're really representing the interests of the people, or at least that they're in the loop and supporting what we're doing, rather than, I think there was that a disconnect from, even though you guys were doing the right thing, people were not aware of it because they didn't really like, we weren't super involved in the community.
Yeah. And I understand that. And for the most part, like me personally, I'm definitely one to kind of like keep to myself.
Yeah.
Which
And Kristen is too.
Right. When we talked about doing that, and we spoke about doing a barbecue and kind of just, getting to know everybody and getting out, partially my fault that I didn't dedicate enough time to that because,
And mine too.
I'm a pretty busy guy outside of, with school, work, HOA, plus all the other things that I get involved with, you know what I mean? So yeah, I agree that I should have dedicated a little bit more time to that. How much I think it would have changed it with hindsight, I think I probably would have got less votes if we were spending HOA money on a barbecue. Yeah, I don't think people would have been happy about it.
Interesting. Okay, so that's an interesting observation. So I was about to say, like, I dropped the ball on, we never brought that barbecue thing to fruition, but I will say there was a lot of people who, when it all kind of went down a couple weeks or last week, that I think if they had known you better, they would have voted your way. If they knew you as a person, because all they saw was your presidential speeches, right? Or your presidential statements or reports. And then perhaps, if they were a recipient of a violation or something like that. And, this isn't to be negative at all, but you are a very different person getting to know you, Raul, the person, on a one-on-one basis or in a small group environment than you are when you're making those reports, right? You are very formal in the reports, and it's not that you're doing a bad job with them, but you don't get a sense of who you are and your personality. And I know you tried to share that and share your story with people, but I don't think they ever.
Well, I shared it with like 4 people.
Well, no, at the comment meeting you shared.
Yeah, that was 8 maybe there.
Oh yeah.
So it was hard to get the ear of 30 some odd people. You know what I mean? 30 other people. But I will say this in my defense that before you got there, everybody who moved in after I got there, I greeted personally.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's
welcomed them to the neighborhood.
Yeah.
If you need anything, I'll tell you. Everybody in there has my phone number. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Said you need something, let me know.
Right.
I'll help you out. People didn't know where to send money.
Right.
I helped them with that. Hey, where can I go eat? Helped them with that. Hey, what's going on with merit and taxes? Helped them with that.
Interesting.
So it wasn't.
And these are people that voted against you.
Yeah,
really?
Complete. Yeah. So there's some people who I talked to like a few days before. Hey, I need the master policy. Text me personally. Raul, can you help me? I got you, man. This is what I want you to do. Go through Pay HOA. Tell them what you need. If they don't talk to you tomorrow, call me. You know what I mean? That's how personal some of them got.
Right. And we always got back to them.
Oh, well, you're right. You know what I mean? I mean, if it wasn't fast enough for them, I can't do anything about that. That's a personal opinion. But professionally, it was fast. It was enough. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, like I said, people came to me for a lot. Somebody says, "Hey, my thermostat is broke. Do you mind coming in?" Absolutely, man. Let me go in there and fix this for you. Fixed it.
Interesting.
Taking time. Not gonna. As a matter of fact, I was eating dinner that day.
Really?
Yeah.
So that's wild to me that you, because I see, and this is I'm glad we're having this conversation because I didn't know about that. Yeah. But in my opinion, that stuff goes a long way towards,
and I knew that,
demonstrating leadership and building rapport in the community. So it makes it even more like glaring that those same people did not support you because of the budget and the reserve study.
Right.
So
I got turned into the boogeyman.
You did.
But
by that group.
Right. By that group who orchestrated this coup. But even with them, like anything that I could do, I always told them, hey, one of them doesn't have internet. Hey, let me show you how you can get internet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not, the crazy part is the gardening standards were crafted around a specific person who led the charge.
Who led the charge, yeah.
So even then, at that point, we kept everybody in mind.
Yeah, you wrote gardening standards that were lenient enough to allow her to continue gardening the way she wanted to.
Specifically her.
Because you guys said, I remember this conversation distinctly. You and Kristen said, she really loves that garden. We don't want to make her get rid of it.
Nope.
As long as she keeps
grandfathered it right in.
As long as she keeps taking care of it and it keeps looking good.
It says it right in there. If you had this prior, as long as you maintain it,
right,
you're good.
And she was the first one to turn on you guys.
And she let her garden die, despite us.
Really?
Yeah.
So
that's what it appeared.
That's what it appeared. Okay. Yeah.
Garden went
right after.
Right after that.
So
again, like it wasn't just that we were just like, I don't care about these people. We're just gonna do whatever we want. No, it wasn't like that.
Right.
The thing is, I feel like, and I can't remember the word. There's you just it starts with you don't have the need to have to tell everybody everything, even good or all the good things that you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Not everybody needs to know, that one guy's running an Airbnb. You know what I mean? We handled it. Right. We're just gonna handle it. You know what I mean? So
we weren't out there, and nor do I think we necessarily should be out there patting ourselves on the back and saying, "Hey, look at what we did," because I think that brings with it a whole different host of issues, right? But ultimately, and I think this is the point we're getting to, is so you guys, we talk, even when you guys are interviewing, I talk to you guys about the importance of a reserve study. I say you guys are brand new, it's a beautiful property, you want to maintain it this way for years to come. Everything's in good shape. You've got lots of time, lots of runway to start building, your reserves up so that when you do need siding, when you do need roofs, when you do need repaving, all that stuff's going to come due in 10 years, 15 years, right? Like how long until the paving starts cracking?
Right.
So, until the roofs start going, I mean, they're like, oh, these buildings are brand new. Well, no, some of them are 10 years old.
Yeah.
Which means you have 10 years left, 15.
To your point, during the meeting, you were talking, and I was, I obviously can hear because you're focused. I'm listening to the background noise, and one of the unit owners had no idea how to mute their microphone.
Right.
We're just talking candidly, and what do we need that for? The places are brand new.
Yeah.
And that was the mindset. I talked to another unit owner. So prior to the meeting, I have a thing about people in short attention spans. It's the nature of society today. So my strategy was, let's get them the day before. Let's call them all. Let's remind them the next day so we're fresh in the mind.
Yeah.
Right? Because if I call them a week out, what did he say again? What was he talking about? I think my strategy was to get them the day before, and remind them the next day. And in talking to everybody, and we talked, I think it was something like 22 owners. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there was people that we knew how they were going to vote. There's people that I already, had talked to previously.
Right.
So that's what it would narrow down to, is like about 22 owners. And that was the biggest thing that I had to explain to them why we needed this. This is a good thing.
Right.
I don't want to drop a $2,000 bill on you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'd rather that we nickel and dime it now.
Right. And
for the future.
You're talking about a relatively marginal increase. You're talking about $50 a month, which I know it sounds like a lot, but it's really not that much when. Go ahead.
No, I'm listening.
No, I know you got signed.
Well, because it was 50 for the reserves, but the budget that everybody already agreed on last year wasn't enough. There was a lot of stuff that people didn't account for.
Right. And they're not going to be able to pull out of that.
Right.
They're going to go have an increase. It's just a matter of how much the increase is going to be.
Right. And I think just, industry standard, an area analysis, what people are paying. I think there was a real disconnect for what reality was.
Yes, there is, because they felt that, oh man, nobody's going to buy our units if our dues are $300 a month. They were currently $216.40,
$216.40, yeah.
right? And our proposed budget would bring it up to roughly the $300 mark, right? $295 one way, or $305 another way. But and then there would be 10 to 20% increases each year from the reserve portion of it,
right?
Which just to fully fund, because these things, you have major, like you got decks, you got windows, you got sliders, you got siding, roofs, paving, catch basins, mailboxes, fences.
Just for some context too, these are big places. These are not small.
No, these large
roofs are big,
large buildings.
They're high.
Yeah, you're talking 40 feet up. Right. It's not something that any roofer is going to get up there. They got to get up with a boom or and tie off, and it's like, it's a thing. So these are big expenses, and what really was demoralizing to me, and what I gathered from that final meeting, that budget meeting where everybody was supposed to vote on this, I explained it. I tried to tell everybody, like, there's a legal component that I was, and I will get into here, because I wrote it up pretty nicely. But, there's too many associations that just put in the bare minimum, and they just want to do a bare minimum 10% fund the reserve and keep $100,000 slush fund. And if they need to draw from it, they need to draw from it. $100,000 is not enough to do anything.
No.
It's not going to get you repaving. It's not going to get you siding. It's not going to get you a roof. It's going to do a dent in those things, and then you're going to special assess for the rest, and then you're going to have no money left for the next project that comes up. And by the time the first one comes up, the next one is close behind, and the next one after that's close behind that, and you didn't take advantage of the 10 years or 15 years of putting away to reserves that you needed to for when these things came. And I explained that, and I think they understood that is the worst part, but they just said, that's a problem for the next guy.
Right.
I'm not going to be here.
Yep.
Either I'm going to sell my unit before then, or I'm going to be dead, because a lot of them are older. Right. And they're like, that's not our problem. We don't care about the next guy.
Right.
That was the message, is we don't care. That's a problem for the next person. We just want our dues as low as possible.
Which is funny because of how short-sighted it is. And
just like it's just bad.
Well, it's mean, actually, because there are some people there who have long-term ideas with their unit, myself included.
Yeah.
I want to be there. I want to have that place as a
summer home. Well, you still want to, I get it.
As a summer home, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
When I retire.
Yeah.
And if it's funded and maintained,
right.
then I don't have to worry.
Or an investment, or a good resale value, or whatever.
Some passive income, why not?
Yeah. How old are you?
39.
39. So you're looking at 30 years from now, because you are still planning on having that property. Right. I know you got a lot of love for the city, deep roots in the city. So you're looking at it like a 30-year investment, and they're not. They're looking at it like, a handful of them are like, I'll be in assisted living in 10 years.
Yeah.
And the other handful are like, well, we're just going hand to mouth right now. So, who cares about 10 years down the road, right? We'll sell, we'll move, we'll do whatever. And it's just, I always go back to the shopping cart analogy. It's like, what it indicated to me are these are all people that aren't putting their shopping cart back when they're done at the grocery store, right? Like
100%.
It's a little thing, but it's like, do the right thing. And so so after that meeting, and I think I told you I didn't tell you about this, because I wrote it. We talked, and I said, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't renew our contract, right? Because we were already 60 days out, so they couldn't term me sooner than that from contract renewal. But, they talked about it in the budget. Well, why are your dues going up? I'm like, my fees are going up because I gave you guys a break on the first year because you guys were getting turned over from the developer.
Our budget was already negotiated. Everybody was already agreed upon it.
So voted. I came down to match your budget.
You did.
But, there was an understanding, like, this isn't normally what we charge. And so right after we talked, and I think I didn't talk to Kristen that night, but I said, I'm talking to my wife about it. And I said, and she overheard a lot of it from the other room. She's like, dude, they suck. She was like, there's a lot of people there who are just miserable. Like, I can't believe they talk to you that way. And I'm like, I know, it's just, so I thought about it and I said, this is what I think I need to say. And I basically outlined 2 points. I said, one, as I'm giving you the contract up front, this is the renewal that, it's due in January. It's, November 1st. So it's due in January 1, it's supposed to renew. Fees are going up. This is a copy of the contract. You guys might not want to sign it. I would be remiss not to mention that you guys can self-manage and save yourself a lot of, $11,000.
You shouldn't have said that.
Well, so I'm
just kidding. They have the option, so it is.
It is, and they want to save the money. And here's the other thing:
if money's the object,
and I hope they do. And I know this isn't good for you, but I hope they do, because they will learn very quickly that all these complaints, all these expectations they had, when all those things are being demanded of them, they're going to realize that the job's far more difficult than they thought it was going to be.
It was difficult for me. There was a lot to keep up with.
Just as a board member.
Right.
Not even managing it, not even coordinating getting the bids, getting the maintenance stuff taken care of, negotiating with contractors, right?
And I'm not a legal expert by any means.
Violations.
Which made me have to kind of like tiptoe around certain things to make sure I didn't get us in legal trouble, which thankfully I had you and Kristen who, does that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Because I don't believe have that support. You know what I mean?
No. And based on how just inaccurately they read those maintenance standards the first time, they're going to get themselves in a bunch of trouble.
Well, it's how they didn't read the reserve study. They didn't read the maintenance standards. They didn't read emails. They didn't read, contracts.
It was all emotion. It was
strictly emotion. There was no logic to
any of it.
And
so that's why that's part of the reason why I was like, you know what, if you guys do decide to self-manage, I think you guys will learn a lot from it. And I even said, and then finally, even if you are good with that contract, if you guys choose not to do any funding for long-term capital replacement, like we did this reserve study, and I referenced the laws that are going to be was already passed in the Senate for Connecticut and went to the House.
Oh, so it was passed in the Senate,
right?
Oh,
and it was.
I knew you mentioned that it was coming, but I didn't realize that
I didn't realize it either. The legislation ended before they could ratify it. But that law, or a more stringent one, is probably going to get passed in 2024. So I'm like,
I know, you know why, right?
Because too many people are doing this crap.
Part of it is zoning. They're changing zoning laws all over the state.
Really?
Yep.
So
because they want to put multifamilies in suburbs, really. They want to rezone all the single family areas
housing
so they can have multi.
Interesting. So
which means they're gonna, places like mine are gonna pop up. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yep. And so I said to them, like, if you guys don't want to put anything away for reserves for the future, and you guys just want to fund the bare minimum, then I can't in good conscience work with you guys.
Right.
Like, I understand. I'm not saying that there's no associations that we work with that don't have a fully funded reserve study. But the issue is that those associations are already 50 years old. They already have a ton of stuff that we know what's failing. We know what needs to be replaced. That's our top priority. But when you have the cushion and you are in a good spot, and the right thing to do is do a reserve study and fund it,
right,
then my obligation and your obligation, if you're really taking care of the association, is to do that.
Right.
And I said, if you guys don't want to do that, then I can't work with you. I can't renew with you guys. So just, when you guys send me back the budget that you want ownership to ratify, just, I just want you to know that, I can't continue to work with you guys if you're just going to ignore the reserve study.
But, and I got a question for you.
Yeah.
What management company in their right mind would go in there knowing that that's their intention? Because I feel like they're gonna.
There's a handful. There's a lot of. I don't want to say unscrupulous, but there's a lot of management companies that they're like, all right, fine, we're just here to collect the check and do what the board wants us to do. I mean, they're really not. I wouldn't, and I know HOA management gets a bad rap for this, but it's true. I mean, they're not necessarily people with crazy, and I'm not saying this of everybody, but there's plenty of management companies that are not super high integrity that are just going to be like, hey, that's fine. I'm here to do whatever you guys want to do. And now I don't think they're going to get a good management company. There are good management companies,
Right.
but I don't think they're going to get a good one if the management company realizes what like the objectives these people are pushing for, like no maintenance standards, no reserve study, just, HOA dues as low as possible for as long as possible. That's the MO, right? If I'm a management company, I'm interviewing with you guys and I realize you got rid of the whole board and fired your last property management company because they ratified maintenance standards and tried to get you guys to, plan according to a reserve study, and you fired them for that, I wouldn't work with you.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll be asking that at the next meeting.
Right?
Whoever comes in, I think I have to do my own due diligence and ask those questions.
Oh, 100%. And I even told Kristen, I said, because she's still on the board, right? And she's like thinking of resigning. I'm like, when they start interviewing other management, if they don't self-manage and they're going to interview other management companies, you should definitely ask the management companies how they feel about the facts of why, they got rid of their board president.
She better tell them the facts.
Well, I think she's going to, right?
She owes me that.
Right. And I think she will. I mean,
I think so. She's very smart.
She's very smart, and she feels stuck because she felt like, she was on board with us. Yeah. And she was on board with you, and we were all on the same page. And now she's stuck in the situation where her values and her aren't aligned with the new board.
Right.
But she realized, like, okay, she can resign, but then there's no checks and balances. Right. But she knows she's getting outvoted on anything anyways because it's 2 against 1. And it's like, but part of her's like, if she doesn't put any input in, then she's letting everybody else down because she's the only sane, reasonable one left, right, advocating for the right thing to do. But if she's going to get outvoted on anything, it's like,
yeah.
So this is what I said, and there was a email that's going back and forth. Obviously, they're trying to get information, see where I stand on stuff, and I'm replying and just trying to be professional and get them the stuff they need because they're new, right? So one of my responses was, I understand that the perception among owners is that $300 a month is high relative to other nearby associations with no amenities, right? And as of today, that's not even true. That's a misconception. But, I could see, why they might say that.
I would like to know which ones they looked at.
That's a good point too. As I mentioned at the annual meeting, amenities are not the only factor that determines an association's expenses. And while you have the blessing of being in a new complex with relatively few current structural problems, age will begin to take its toll on these structures over the next 10 years. The biggest factor in determining whether HOA dues are high or not relative to the area and therefore determining a resale value is if the association has a long-term capital reserve plan in place and if they are fully funding it. If dues are a little higher, it's okay as long as your realtor advertises that you have done a reserve study and that you are able to provide a budget demonstrating that the association is fully funding it. There are currently probably less than 5% of associations locally that are doing that, which is why your perception that your dues would be unusually high is wrong.
Makes sense.
Because there's very few complexes doing that. I mentioned it to everybody in passing at the annual meeting regarding the upcoming legislative changes. However, I was unable to give specifics at that time. I want to take this opportunity to give more specific context as to the implications of the reserve study now that I've gotten a chance to look back in my notes. I've included below what I was able to find from this continuing education course. The Connecticut Common Interest Ownership Act requires reserve funding. Typically, associations allocate 10 to 20% of their operating budget to reserves. This has to be separate from operating expense funding. During the 2023 state legislative session, the Senate passed proposed bill SB 212, an act requiring condominium reserve fund allocations. The bill did not get to vote by the House prior to the adjournment of the 2023 legislative session. The Condominium Association Institute, Connecticut chapter, is adamant that this bill, or perhaps an even tougher bill, will be passed in the next session. The purpose of this bill is to require that condominium associations perform a reserve study and subsequently allocate the appropriate percentage of annual assessments into the reserved fund based on that reserve study. We are already seeing specific questions on resale certificates and mortgage questionnaires loosely referencing this, but they will get more stringent and more specific once passed. Many states already mandate these studies, and it appears very likely in 2024 Connecticut will also mandate a study. Reserve studies are an essential tool in examining and maintaining financial health of the association. In addition to including a financial analysis, a reserve study provides a physical analysis of the condition of the common elements along with the estimated costs of repairing or replacing them. I believe that once this law is passed and associations become legally required to properly fund their long-term capital reserves based on reserve studies, you will find that in the subsequent 2 to 3 years, the HOA dues around Connecticut are going to skyrocket. Most associations have frankly pathetic reserve balances and have kept dues artificially low by neglecting to fund capital reserves for the past few decades. This result is going to be that they will have to make up for decades of deferred contributions in a matter of years, as many structures are already reaching the end of their usable life. Based on the numbers I am seeing elsewhere, I expect that it will not be uncommon for dues to be $600 to $900 a month in many older communities with no amenities.
Oof.
I already know of some relatively low-end communities where this is already occurring. I think in 4 to 5 years, your owners will look at their HOA dues of hypothetically $360 to $400 and be grateful that they are low relative to most others, and that they will be grateful that they started putting money away according to their reserve study as early as 2024. And then I go on to say, my assistant's printing the reserve studies, we're passing them out. So
That warms my heart.
that warms your heart that I said that?
Well, I didn't know that I remember you mentioned, that you said it for one, and that, I didn't know that it already had passed the Senate.
Right.
Which, it's coming.
It's coming. And now they're exposing themselves. If they don't fund it, they're exposing themselves to liability because they're not doing their job in protecting the association if they're choosing not to abide by those. Moreover, I know a Hartford complex. I thought their dues were like $900 a month because I was interviewing their maintenance manager last week. But turns out I just found out that somebody else who was on my podcast, his ex-girlfriend bought in that complex. And their dues are $1,200 a month.
Oof.
Now everything's included, like heat, electricity, internet, all that stuff. But like they have a pool that hasn't worked in 5 years. And the place sounds like run down. Like they're paying $1,200 a month, and they're not even able to catch up on these dues. And he's afraid the maintenance supervisor is afraid they're gonna go bankrupt, and that's why he's looking for another job. Wow. So
we specifically talked about that at the meeting about bankruptcy.
Right. And the reason why all these things are being put in place is to prevent those types of things from happening.
Right.
So I think my point with it all is once that passes, you're going to see relative HOA dues jump. You're going to see, because a lot of older communities haven't been doing this. You're going to see dues jump by double, triple, because they realize, hey, we did a reserve study and we found out we have no money for anything. We need new sidings, we need new roof, we need new paving, we need new, whatever. And there's no money for it. And now everybody's got to catch up, right? So, right? So
that's a big deal.
It's a huge deal. So if you end up selling your unit and you end up looking at a condo, keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind.
Which if I ever did sell, I'm not opposed to going to another condo. I'm just armed with a lot more information.
Right. We got one we manage in Berlin that I think you'd like. You'd be happy there. And they're doing things the right way.
That's good.
And it's not far
from
where you're at.
It's unfortunate, man, that even prior to us knowing about this legislation, we had the foresight to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And we're penalized for it.
Right. And so that's the craziest part about it is like, we explained this to ownership. We did this budget based on data and information. Yeah. We paid for. A firm came in. They told us this is how much you got to put away. This is what you guys need to do to be responsible. And then we tried to do the responsible thing. And they were like, no. And I think you're right. It all boils down to the dollar. Like a lot of those votes that voted against the budget and against you as your presidency, right, were, people who didn't care and either didn't care or didn't realize that the actions you were taking were the right ones.
Yeah.
Were correct. You were working on their best interest, right? And in turn, me, like, again, this is bitter. I don't want to say bittersweet. It's tough because it's the first association that I consider it like a mutual part, but it's the first association we've ever lost, right? Like every association we've managed, they're still with us. This is the first one that we've ever managed that's no longer going to be working with us, right?
It speaks to what you guys do. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. But that was kind of part of my thing was like, we've never had an association leave us. And so it sucks that I can't say that in the same way. But at the same token, it's like, if I'm going to lose an association, I'm okay with this.
And I understand why you said that.
Right.
It's tough. I think what we ran into gave too many disgruntled people too much power to push us out.
Well, that's the nature of the game.
Yeah.
It's a democratic process. And anytime you're looking at a true democracy where the people choose, right? You're depending on the informedness and education and sensibility of the people.
Right.
And so, everybody says America's a democracy. Technically, it's a republic, but right.
Constitutional republic.
But this is the danger of, this is why I think we look at the last few presidents, right? And this isn't to, I try not to get political.
No, but logic
will
show you.
and we saw on both sides, right? One Republican, one Democratic. Neither were necessarily, if you sat and pick anybody in the country to be the most qualified person to lead it, I think most sensible people would not have chosen either of those.
Yeah.
Either Biden or Trump as the most sane, rational, intelligent, well put together individuals to lead the country. But because of social pressure, right? And basically a lot of people who are, voting based on their emotion, just how they feel and their perceptions. And really there's only a limited amount of candidates being put before them, right? It's like, these are your options. And they're two relatively not great options.
Yeah, they're polar opposites.
Yeah. And it's like, so this is, but we're running into it on a smaller scale. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from this whole experience for me is the importance of politics at the end of the day, it's small time politics at its finest.
Yeah.
Right.
Agreed.
And just because you're doing the right thing or just because you're the most capable at your job or you're the best performer doesn't mean you're going to get the job or keep the job. Because if the perception of the masses, and even if it's just the masses in your community, is that you are not advocating for their interest, even if you are, but if the perception is that you're not.
And that's what I think that letter did, change the perception of everybody.
It did. The letter they distributed.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't think they know about, but they distributed that group that was kind of doing this coup. They distributed a letter to everybody, basically just saying, this is crazy. They're raising their dues and they plan to go up again the next year and the next year.
Yeah.
With no context, no reference to the reserve study, no solution.
Right.
That's the other piece of it. And Kristen, I think she got burnt out during that meeting, but
I was burnt out.
Everybody was burnt out.
I was just there was no reasoning.
There was, and there wasn't. And
Right.
and it's like, well, what's the alternative? What is your solution?
Right.
Like, we're proposing these dues and we have reasons why we're doing that. And it's very linear and logical. You're saying, no, dues are too high. We're going to lower them. How?
Right.
This is your promise. How are you going to do that?
There was 33 out of 38.
That voted no.
There was 33 out of 38 that were on the call in the meeting.
Yep.
And not one person asked the question. We laid out as best we could the future of that place. And not one person had a question for us. And not one person had a question for them. Which made me feel that, one, their mind was already...
The decision was made.
It was already made up.
Yep.
And it didn't matter now.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right. Well, there was a few people that I think could have gone the other way. There was a lot of people whose minds were made up.
And I think part of that was how we voted, where it was like,
oh, yes.
101, how do you vote? Bang.
Right.
2, how do you vote? No, or whatever it was.
Right.
Or whoever they were voting for.
It was a public thing.
It was right. And I think that what could have helped was that if it was private, because I think there were some rational people there
that voted the wrong way
because of the public pressure.
Yeah. So it's interesting because even like last week I was doing work, and the book that I've been listening to is Influence by Robert Cialdini. And he talks about different features that influence groups of people in decision making. And it was recommended to me by another business guru that I follow. And in that book, he talks about how big social pressure is. He talks about that there's studies that even like if there's a very public suicide, if it's a single person suicide that's very public, the amount of suicides like go up by 1,000% in the following weeks. And if it's like a multiple suicide, then you see stuff like the specific example was whenever there's a highly publicized like murder suicide, there's a 1,000% increase in plane crashes, multi-fatality plane crashes in the next like few weeks. And the reason is because there's a lot of people, he gets into the science behind it, but there's people who are already feeling this way, and seeing someone else do it gives them the social permission to do it themselves.
Yeah, it solidifies it for them too.
Right. And so, and that's one kind of example, but in a wider applicable basis, it's like whatever most people are going with, there's a very strong social pressure component where most people are going to go along with what they see others doing. So there was another example of a murder rape in New York City where there was 38 eyewitnesses, and all of the eyewitnesses saw that other people were looking at it. But because nobody seemed alarmed and nobody called the police and nobody thought there was a problem, everybody just watched this lady get murdered because they didn't know it was the social cues and social pressure. Everybody's just looking at each other and like, well, if nobody else is concerned, then. So the police are doing the investigation, come to find out that 38 people saw it. Nobody bothered to call the police. Right?
Yeah.
And just the power of social pressure. And so I wish we could have navigated it differently to factor that in. I can't go back in time, but it's a good real world application to see, I think it was probably close. There was a lot of people on the fence. And once we started going down the line, or even if there was an order that we selected the people who we knew would vote our way first, right? And just front load it with that, then more people would start voting the way we wanted them to, right? But we didn't have a good strategy in place for that. I didn't, and I'll take ownership for that because that's my job, right? I tried to be better at the social component and the psychological components of these things. And I think that's important to me.
It is. And we had this conversation, I believe.
Yeah. And I wish I navigated that better. And one of the ways that I think I could have is having a more strategic play with how the voting itself happened.
Yeah. Because I think even that was ambiguous in our docs that it was entirely up to us how we wanted to do it.
Right. And we did pick a strategy that we thought would be advantageous for us.
Yeah.
But we did not factor in the social pressure component.
Yeah.
And well, actually we did. We said we wanted to go budget first because we think we have a good rationale or logic behind why.
And I think that they're right. That's why we went that way, was because how can you look at that as a rational person and be like, this is a bad idea?
Right. And I said, if they vote yes if we get the budget passed,
Yeah.
then I think we can solidify your reelection as president, right? Because they're already going to be like, okay, this is right. So we're using the budget to lay out all the facts and the reasoning is why we're doing the right thing. And then by in turn, once that's passed, they're going to look at you and say, yeah, he made the right decision. Mm-hmm. But because the budget vote went the way it did, once that happened, it was like,
well, I knew at that point, I was like, if they don't want the budget, then they don't want me.
Right.
So,
and so, that's a lesson for me for next time is looking at those public voting spheres and understanding how we can navigate those situations for the best outcome.
And I mean, obviously it doesn't matter for me now, but something for you, utilizing the communication system a little bit more, I think we could have shaped a little bit better narrative about what we were doing.
Yeah.
If more emails went out about what was going on, or even if the vote came down to like, a digital option to like,
yes,
hey,
a survey.
A survey, boom, who would you like?
That would have been great.
You could do it anonymously.
You need to know who votes which way.
Well, and that's fine, but like
you don't see everybody else voting,
right?
Yeah.
We factor out the societal pressure on it. You can just.
I agree.
Votes are in. There was 20 for all.
I agree with that. I agree with that a lot. And that's kind of one of those things where you roll the dice on. You roll the dice hoping that you set up enough of a case where the social pressure pushes people in your direction.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I have to look at as well is usually my strategy is kind of a wait and hold strategy and kind of observe and let everybody make their moves and let things play out. Mm. And I think we did that too much this time. Like I think we underestimated how much traction they were getting within the community. Because I've seen other associations, or not associations, but other unit owners in other associations take that tactic where they're, privately trying to undermine the board and do all this stuff. And usually the result is that it makes them look crazy, and it makes the board look sane and rational, like they're trying to do the right thing.
And sound logic.
Yeah.
Very sound logic. It's something like you don't achieve some of the things that we've achieved, not thinking that way.
Correct.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, just general success in life, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And it helped me, I guess, understand that, there's another side to me being so rigid, and so, it's got to be by the book, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But we learned from it, and we apply it for next time. And you know what? If you keep your unit there, I think once the law passes, it's going to be, you're going to have to go back to the reserve study anyways.
At a lot more money.
Well, yeah, they're going to have to catch up. But I think if you stay, we're not looking at, I try to look at things in the context of battles and wars. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the mentors that I try to follow and look at, especially people with high net worth, like hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, the thing that sets them apart from everybody else is that they look at things on a longer time scale, right? So I think what makes us successful relative to maybe some of the other unit owners that are making these more short-sighted decisions is just the fact that we're looking at things on a longer time scale. We're looking at the 20, 30-year plan, 40-year plan. And I think that given enough, and I even put this at the end of my email, I was like, listen, I can't get in good conscience work with you because if you guys come to the realization in a couple of years, like I'm at right now, that what I'm doing is the right choice. Like I'm trying to push you guys to doing the right thing for yourselves. Then, if I continue to work with you knowing that you're not doing the right thing, then I've burned my opportunity to work with you later. Yeah. Whereas if I step back now and say, hey, if you're not going to fund a reserve, if you're not going to do a long-term capital funding, I can't work with you. Then in a few years, when people come to their senses and realize that what I was preaching this whole time was right, when they're no longer able to make electronic payments, when their new management companies taking 2 months to get back to them on their maintenance requests, right? They'll say, oh man, like Jared was actually pretty good. Paladin was like, let's go back because they were doing things the right way back then.
Yeah.
It was just us that was wrong, right? So I don't know that that's going to happen, but
I'll be there when it does. Because if I do find out that that does happen, I'm sending a letter to everybody there. I can, I've got called petty. I could get.
Well, you know, and who knows? I mean, maybe after a couple of years of this failed attempt at whatever they try next, right? If we know, if we're confident that we're doing the right thing, and we're confident that what they're trying to do is the wrong thing, given on a long enough time scale, they're going to end up like if they self-manage or they get a new management company, now they got to put their money where their mouth is, right? And they're going to realize that it's not as easy as they made it sound when they were pitching everybody on it. And if the performance drops even a little bit, and eventually dues have to go up anyways, and the law passes, it's like, you know, now they're on the hook. Now they're on the hot seat because they made these promises. Everybody believed they were going to be better.
Yeah.
And if they're not, like, what are you going to say?
I think for me though, like, this is the decision whether to stay or not is going to be in a 2-year plan versus a
5-year plan or a 10-year plan.
Right. Because I'm concerned about the amount of damage they can do in that amount of time.
On the 5 or 10-year scale. But in a 2-year scale, they can't do that much.
Right.
Yeah.
The other concern is obviously the market, you know, presidential elections. There's a lot of things that are coming up in the next year. You know, I don't mean
that could go very well or very badly. Because if we see a housing market crash, which is already happening in other parts of the country, but Connecticut's delayed a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So if we see a housing crash, yeah, you'll be able to buy a property for less, but you're not going to be able to sell your property for as much.
Right.
In some cases, it might be worth selling, renting for a couple of years and buying back in.
Right.
But we don't know.
Because, you know, just look at like cryptocurrency, and if when you would have bought and lost, and you know, it's just
maybe it'll go back up. Who knows?
It's very unpredictable. So,
yeah.
The thing is that for me now, it's no longer in my control. I'm you know, at the mercy of their decisions.
Right.
Whether obviously, what the decisions they made with which means from my understanding, they're going to be making a lot of those decisions with other things that go on there.
Right. I mean, I'm in for the next 2 months, right? And then, you know, they've given me the acknowledgement that they're not going to renew, which is fine, and we'll go our separate ways. And I'll be as helpful as possible in getting them all the paperwork and the documents and saying, hey, you know, you guys, they even get to keep the software if they want to give it a go. But there's a lot of information and a lot of invoice, a lot of financial data in that software where if they choose to move off of it, you know, they're going to lose a lot of really important functionality.
Access as well. I mean,
yeah,
I look at whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. So.
Right. And I think they didn't realize how much, like when I opened up the permissions for them and they realized how much access they have in that software.
Yeah.
Like, I think I'm curious to see if they end up trying to self-manage or not.
Yeah. You can't find a hyperlink in an email to click on it. I don't know how you're going to manage my HOA.
I don't know, but I know what the market is calling for other management. Like I know what other management companies charge. I know who else is out there. Like,
so did we.
And it's like, I don't, you know, they might hire someone who they think is going to be good, but I think they're going to have the same issues plus some when they end up making that switch.
What, in my understanding as well, is that they want to make it a more community effort where they want to solicit from owners who they want to do what. And if they want, you know, people to, if you have a particular skill and can help out and save money here.
That's a great plan, but that's part of my strategy too. I agree with that.
I disagree.
Oh, okay.
And I'll tell you why. I think that if you come into an issue where if, say, a unit owner does something, he promises the world, and then it's shoddy, then what? Now you have an owner who's disgruntled, and a board is disgruntled because now everybody's upset because now we got to pay for it again.
Right. No, I see that. And I see your perspective with that. My experience has been in utilizing community people and assets has been largely positive. Where but I mean, I'm talking about, there's a lady who loves weeding and we pay her $300 for the season to weed all the flower beds. And it's like, she does a great job. She enjoys doing it. She gets a little extra money and the association saves a couple grand.
Right.
Right. Or, someone in the association has a certain connection or a certain skill set that we utilize on behalf of the association to save money. I'm good with that. And I know your approach is different than that.
I get weary about it.
And that's okay.
Now, if you're doing it, we had one unit owner who was an HVAC guy. That's what he did.
Right.
This is business.
It's licensed and insured.
Totally. Let's do it. Maybe he can give us a better rate. But, if you're telling me that whoever is going to go out and install a solar light or a camera and then we'll fall down off his ladder.
That was another thing. They asked about workers' comp insurance and stuff like that. And I said,
that's why.
Yeah. And I'm like, you guys don't have an if any policy. That was something that was voted, against because we didn't want the association doing, or, the board didn't want the association doing this kind of stuff.
But what comes of that? More cost.
Oh yeah. I said,
Right. Where are you going to really save any money here?
Right.
One guy falls down, then what? That's what I worry about.
Well, you don't have to worry about it now.
Well, no, I don't, but maybe. It's funny because you get professionals from all over the place, right? But I always have the saying that not every doctor graduated at the top of their class. You don't know what you're going to get.
That's true.
You know what I mean? Yeah, you might be a licensed contractor, but if you suck at what you do.
No, it's true. I'm happy that we're at a point where we have contractors that I really like the way they work. I trust their work. We don't really.
That's the beauty of having you, though.
Yeah, we don't get callbacks. We have. I think part of my value add, compared to a lot of other management companies, is I foster really good relationships with most of the people I work with.
Yeah, you have a great personality. I mean, everything we've asked of you, you did. You know what I mean? So there was never some people more than others are like, I need it now.
Right.
You know what I mean? But
Andy got his resale package in time.
He did.
And he did not vote your way.
No.
That was a little, he promised it.
I mean, what I'm
just saying. I was like
social pressure, maybe?
I don't know, man. I don't know. But, we always try to do what we say we're going to do and do it in a timely manner. And I understand that some people's timelines are a little bit different, but I can promise you this much. When they go and check out another management company, their timelines are longer. I don't know a management company with a quicker response time than us. Even though ours are perceived as long by some.
Yeah.
I think it's just because
which is incredible because they were horrible before that.
I know.
Awful. Just awful.
I don't know.
So it's like
I don't know.
I don't know either. What do you want? Everything's relative, man. You can pay less, right? But what's the old saying? You get what you pay for. I mean,
I've had some people say, "Don't tell me that." I hate that saying, and it's like, well, I found it to be true.
I mean, we have a case example right here.
Oh man.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of decisions to make.
Yeah.
As far as my long-term outcome there, I don't know. This was productive just for me.
Just talking about it.
Yeah, and just which way I'm going to lean. I think the biggest thing for me was the legislation that is going to happen. There's a super majority in Connecticut that's going. They want it. They're getting it.
Yeah, and so yeah, you might be in. If your biggest concern is that the reserve study is not going to be funded and you guys are going to get screwed long term by holding, then the legislation should protect you from that.
It should. I think the insurance thing is going to be big for me because I have a good feeling that they're going to get rid of the maintenance standards.
They might.
I think they're going to get rid of the gardening standards. I think all that's going to go away.
If that goes away, then again, you guys are in a bad spot. The maintenance standards, like, I mean, I told them when they took over, I said, guys, call any attorney in the state that deals with condo law. Any attorney, ask them about a maintenance standards. Just ask them their opinion. What is your opinion on maintenance standards? What's your opinion on a reserve study? These are your sticking points, right? These ultimately, from my perspective, the issue is that you felt like the maintenance standards and the reserve study and the funding of the reserve study got pushed down your throat and that you weren't consulted on it. And it's like, go talk to an attorney. It's not a consultation thing. It's not an optional thing.
Right.
It's not something that you can like take or leave. It's a thing that you need to do.
Yeah.
And like,
It's the responsible thing to do.
And if you're not going to do it, then you guys are on your own. I don't know what to tell you.
Well,
Like,
that's kind of how I'm feeling. So, I got to wait and see where they go with those 3 items: the reserve study, the maintenance standards, and the garden standards. If those garden standards that they include, like the lights and all that other stuff, that stuff is good for the community, just as a whole. Mm-hmm. The maintenance standards and the reserve study are good financially, and if those financial thing, and I told you, don't mess with my money. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. If we get into financial issues, obviously we're going to know within the next 90 days, right? Who's going to be there? We're going to be able to have a chance to talk to them. If those items for me aren't there, then you're talking about a high possibility of selling.
Yeah. And I would agree with you.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah. I mean, you put that place together exactly the way you wanted it, right?
Yeah. Not only that, man, we put it on a good track for longevity.
Yeah.
And that no longer exists. Yeah. And if it is to exist again, say they take it away, if it's to exist again, it's going to be by force and it's going to be too late.
Well, yeah. I think that the reserve study, if it's legally by force in 2024, I think you guys are in decent shape.
The problem also is the maintenance standards.
Yeah, that it's going to be, you guys are going to get burned on a big insurance claim.
Right.
It's going to be too late.
I don't want that.
Right. Yeah.
That's too short-sighted for me, man.
I agree.
Unfortunately, it's
I agree.
It's sad, man. It's sad. I think we had a really good thing going. I hate to see, I know that you take it in stride, and you look at this as a win, or not as a loss, but a way to be better about it. A learning experience. Yeah. And I agree, because I always self-reflect the same way you do. Yeah. But I hate to lose. I don't like to. I haven't failed in anything in my life until this. Everything that I do, I put 100% into it. Yeah. You look at my college score. Mm-hmm. I'm flirting with 4.0. You know what I mean? Yeah. Honor society. Right. Because I don't like anything less than perfection. Right. And we're not on that path anymore. But you shared the vision, which is what I appreciate it. And to everybody who, hopefully watches this, I do want to thank you for your professionalism, your candor, your ability to take me when I'm veering off the edge and just, hey, all right, let's kind of get this back in line, and let's work. Let's get this right. You really did protect me a little bit from myself, and I learned so much from you, from Kristen, and like I always open the meeting thanking you guys. You guys both of you guys definitely made me a better person going forward. Thanks, which, like you said, is good. I appreciate that. I really do, and it's been a pleasure working with you. And I really appreciate the opportunity. You guys were, believe it or not, the 4th. So we have 12 associations now. Wow. We
at the end of 2023, we had 3 associations. You were our 4th. And we've just blown up this year.
That's awesome, man.
And, but we were relatively early on when we were interviewing and you guys decided to come on with me. And, you know, you gave me the opportunity, and I really appreciate it. I don't take that lightly. And, you know, for everything that's happened and how it all ended, the reality of it is that we had a really great working relationship for the majority of that year, for all of that year.
All of it. Yeah.
And, you know, we were able to be candid with each other.
Yeah.
And even if we didn't agree on something, we were able to work through it and have mutual respect. And I think I know you don't like to lose on stuff. But there's certain things like, so being in recovery, right? You know, got to have the serenity to accept the things I can't change, right? Yeah. We didn't lose. I don't look at it as a failure. Like, we didn't lose because we failed or we didn't do the right thing. It's part of just accepting that some things are beyond our control. Yeah. Right. And while it feels like a loss, the reality is that we can always keep our heads up high and look back at this, say we did the right thing by you guys.
Yeah. History will be kind to us.
History will be kind to us. Yeah. I agree with that. That's a great way to put it.
I want you to save that last meeting, the minutes from that.
Yep.
Send them over, because I want to hold that one in my pocket.
Yep. And I can, well, I don't know if I can, but Kristen can share the emails with you. since the whole changeover, they've been, I'm sure Kristen is, because what I put in those emails, if things go sideways, is going to be very damning, because their property manager let them know what the right thing to do was. Well, and if they choose not to do it, that's on them.
I just hope I'm out before that comes around, because
they might be in a year and then turn it back over to you, man. Who knows?
Yeah, I may not be there.
Fair enough. Let's go get some barbecue, man.
Yeah, let's do it, man. I appreciate this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Thank you, guys.